Hello everyone and welcome to another track guide for the Dallara IR-18, the US Open Wheel B series. This week we'll be talking about week 12, which is going to be, well, the last week for season 3 at Spa-Francorchamps. Well, I do expect this should be a very good participation week. Spa is a very popular track and not without reason. It is an amazing track in my opinion, like downright one of the best in the world. I'd say like close contest with Nordschleife, depending on your preference. Well, Bathurst is really good as well, I suppose. But let's not get into a track framework here, shall we? But then again, like I really like Spa. I have many hours in this track in iRacing and other sims, and so it's one of those weeks where I get into the car and I start driving, and in just a couple laps I feel like I'm in good pace. And this is both good and bad because I felt the need to make very few setup changes to the iRacing set, as we'll see in a bit. But this could be actually down to the fact that I'm very familiar with the track and not that the set is necessarily good or bad. But still, I think that the time that we'll see here is pretty competitive. And our focus will be as usual, right? We'll see the full lap from the cockpit view. Uncommented, then we'll talk about setups. Next we'll have the track guide, and finally we'll talk about strategy options. Right? Let's begin. Right, let's talk about the setup now. So I'm using the iRacing set as base, as per usual. This is a quali set. You are already aware of that. So basically what you're gonna have to do with the set I'm providing you is upping the fuel to 70 liters and making a quick change to the radiator here, which I'll point out, otherwise you're good to go. Okay, so on the left here I have my set because it was already loaded, so I did that. And on the right here it's the default iRacing set. So differences, tire compound obviously. So I'm moving from primary to alternate, quali set evidently. I upped the front downforce quite a little bit from 8 degrees to 13 degrees. Same with the rear downforce from 24.4 degrees to 32.4 degrees. And you may think, well, but there's such big straights like the Camel Straight and the one leading up to Blanquimont. Wouldn't that sacrifice too much? And that is true. Like you do lose quite a few tenths by having greater downforce, but there's two things that you gain from that. First of all, you gain time in the second sector, which is important obviously, and also you reduce the tire usage quite a bit. And so maybe in a race setting, you might want to reduce the downforce if you'd like, because it's easier to pass people in the straights and it's obviously harder to pass someone in the twisty bits. But I guess with drafting and push-to-pass, if someone with higher downforce gets past you in the camera straight, then it's over, because you're never going to catch them in the middle sector, and then yeah, that's about it. And so I found there should be a sweet spot in terms of downforce. You can experiment with a bit more, perhaps with a bit less, but the iRacing defaults I think are a bit too extreme in the other direction. Radiator close to 77%, basically free time gain. You can't run this in race, alright, so in race you're gonna run 70%. Let's see what else. There's the usual stuff that changes in the suspension, which I didn't actually change it because of the fuel. So fuel from 70 liters to 11.5. This is good for a single lap. You know the drill already. The tire drag is high with the softs, and so the second lap is not ever good enough to beat the first lap. This is interesting because Spa is quite a long lap, and so you just about barely have enough time to do two out laps and 2 quali laps if you mess up the first. So yeah, like, it's a bit iffy. If you try and run the set with a single lap and you mess up the lap, it's quite likely that you'll not have a qualifying time at all, so do keep that in mind. Another change, front bar blade position from 3 to 5 and rear from 3 to 1. This is kind of standard, as you've seen by now. Better grip to the front end of the car, a bit more understeer but more stability. And as the sim progresses, I would even perhaps bump this from 5 to 6 using in-car controls. And I really don't understand why they have 3 and 3 here. I guess someone prefers this, but not me, to be honest. And yeah, those were all the changes. No changes to gearing or differential I felt were needed this time. Otherwise, pretty good setup, and yeah, I'm pretty happy with this for sure. Alright, so let's now go to the track guide. So as per usual, this is a qualifying run, so the car is very light. When you are in race setting, perhaps things will be a bit different, so do keep that in mind, but I'll try to point out the differences as we move through. Okay, so we're coming up here towards La Source. Okay, so having my eyes peeled towards the 100 board here, right? 100 board is a bit late to brake, to be honest with you. So I would think perhaps in the middle here, let's see exactly what's the brake marker. Yeah, it's pretty close to the 100 board, as you can see here. Let's check the pedal input here. I think it's gonna be like 120 or so. Yeah, 120, 110, right? So about this much. I use VR, so it's kind of hard for me to say, well, when the board is at X spot or everything, because like my head moves obviously, and so I don't have a fixed point. And from my perspective, once the 100 board goes over the tire right about here as it passes through, I know it's time to brake. As the stint progresses and your tires get older, or if you're running the high compound, or if you're running a full fuel tank, you're gonna have to pull this braking spot a little bit back, right? So I'd say about 130. 150 is definitely too early, all right? But maybe somewhere around here or a bit further along, right about here, would be a good braking marker. All right, in terms of gearing, we are in 5th gear now, as you can see. We're gonna downshift all the way to 1st. In a straight line, and then you're gonna turn in to La Source. In terms of turning spot, well, yeah, not many markers here, right? Yeah, there's nothing much. Perhaps this white spot here would be a good one, as it moves outside of your view. As you can see, it's a turning point. To be honest with you, I go by few here. Now this corner is very interesting, because you would think, well, surely it would be faster to go through the middle here, right? Very close to the ball. And in several cars, this is in fact the case. But what I found after several laps is that actually cutting it way too close to the wall, it's very bumpy here. And so the car gets very, very unstable. the result is that you have to wait a lot to get on power, because if you get on power early, then the back end will be all over the place and you're going to spin the car. And so if you are way too inside the woods here, inside the painted tarmac here, the green stuff, you get very unstable, and thus you have to wait to accelerate, which obviously is very, very bad with the huge straight coming up. And so what I found is that this is even way too far, in my opinion. So I would think that having the right side tires on top of the white line here, or even the drain, would be a little bit better. This is okayish. If you look from the cockpit view, you see the car doesn't have that much variation here. Let's see, it bumps a little bit on exit. Like, check the halo here. So see, I basically wait for the halo and the car itself to be stable, and then I can go full on power. You can correlate with my pedal input here as well. But yeah, all the times I try to cut it close to the wall, I actually gained time on entry, but I had to wait so much to get on power that I lost everything on exit again. So yeah, I would recommend max getting to the curb, perhaps a little bit closer to the drain would be even better, in fact. All right, so now we have the cam straight, which nothing much to talk about here. Now, in terms of gearing here, you see that I'll stay in 5th gear. Let me pull the camera back so you can see. And there's a reason for that. So even though it was technically possible for me to upshift to 6th on the bottom of Eau Rouge there, I didn't do that because as you move up towards Radion, the car is gonna obviously lose speed as you were going uphill, and then 6th gear is gonna be too weak, or not too weak, but you're gonna not have as much torque as you would have in 5th gear, and then you're gonna lose time, about half a tenth to a tenth on the follow-up straight. So really the thing I'd advise you is to just keep the car in 5th, and once you crest over Radion, then you upshift to 6th. All right, we're coming up to, I have my my reference here, so we're coming up to Lecon and Malmedy. So braking point here, pretty easy. It's the curb. Actually, it's not the curb. It's like 2/3 as you move along the curb. So if we imagine, let me pull it back a little bit. All right, so let's imagine the curb starts here and ends here, right? So let's say you divide the curb in 3 parts. It would be here and then here. I suppose you can see my mouse. So this would be the first third, then the second third, and then the final third of the curb. So looking to brake about 2/3 in, about here. This is completely visual, as you can, in terms of like, there's no actual reference. I kind of divide the curb in my head and go off 2/3. But with practice, you can like get this pretty easily. So let's look at the pedal input. So it's right about here, as you can see, which is in fact 2/3 of the curb. As per usual, older tires or heavier car, pull it back a little bit. I would say that the beginning of the curb is pretty conservative, but it's pretty safe as well, so you can experiment with that. Otherwise, you can experiment with somewhere in between, here and there. So we're downshifting from 6th all the way to 2nd, and it's very, very easy to over-brake in this part, all right? So what I found out as I started was that I was doing okay-ish lap times, but as I started braking less and less here, I started to gain more and more time. So be very careful so as not to overslow the car, because you do have quite a bit of downforce, as we talked about in the setup section, and thus you can somewhat trust the car to make the corner. Another thing that you'll notice here, check out the pedal input. This is a very patient section in terms of you're not actually going to go 100% on power ever. You're just gonna like keep the car in here, and then when you sense, all right, I can accelerate a little bit, you do that, and then you coast a little bit, and then you're right, I can accelerate once again. On Malmedy here, I actually turned 7, which I don't have the name in my reference here. You want to position the car to the left here. You don't have to actually get on top of the curb or anything, but like to the left of the track is a good thing. And then you're going to turn in pretty early. As you can see, this is an early turn in by all counts. You don't want to get on top of this curb at all, right? A very dangerous curb to get on top of. So try and avoid it. For sure in chase cam, you'll see here that I try and keep my car max on the stripe part, not on the cement or something up here, right? And then you can start accelerating pretty early at the apex, to be honest. Yeah. And then the easy part to mess up here is the off track. If you accelerate too early, it's not that your car is necessarily gonna spin out or anything, or that you're gonna crash, but that can happen. It has happened to me a few times. But the problem here is getting the off track. So if you have both your right side tires outside of the white line, that's gonna be an off track. And so be very careful to not accelerate too early here. And what's gonna do, it's gonna overshoot your car to the outside here, and you're gonna get an off track, which obviously is gonna invalidate your qualifying lap. So let's see the section in chase cam now. So braking about 2/3, second gear, very patient. Third gear. All right, and then fourth gear, and we come up to rivage. Okay, so well, pretty straightforward. Your braking point is going to be the curb itself, right? As the curb starts, you brake, downshift from fourth to first. If you have older tires, heavier car, pull it back a little bit, like about the car length or so would be enough. You're going to brake in a straight line, and then as you're in first gear, what is critical in this corner here is trail braking. So you have to be very judicious in your trail brake here, so you have the right amount of turn in, but not overslow the car also. And then in terms of acceleration point, what I like to use as reference is this curb here. As it starts, I know it's pretty close to the time to start accelerating. It varies a little bit because sometimes I keep more speed in the middle of the corner, sometimes it keeps less speed. And so if I'm going slower, I can accelerate a little bit earlier. Otherwise, I'll wait a little bit more. In this lap in particular, pretty much coincidental with the start of the curb itself. As you can see, as the curb starts, I start accelerating. You don't go all the way on the throttle because otherwise you're going to overshoot to the wall here. So just control the throttle just enough in first gear so you know you'll make it. You can go all the way into the curb here, but this is not actually good because you're going to have to traverse quite a lot of ground here so you make it to this curb for no name, which is a left-hander. Right? This corner is very hard in terms of the amount of understeer you get here. So this is one that demands practice, so you get the right amount of trail brake you need to make the car turn and not overslow at the same time. This is one of the corners I had to practice the most during practice for this video. Also one of the corners that it gets progressively harder as the stint progresses as well. Okay, so coming up to no name, we're in second gear now. You wanna climb on top of the curb here. Don't overdo it, alright? Don't get on top of the painted tarmac here or the grass even. And then you're gonna just dab the brakes a little bit, just so the car points the nose inside, and then you can start accelerating. In terms of when to accelerate, this is really hard because you can accelerate actually pretty early, but the fact of the matter is gonna overshoot this exit here, which is not a problem, it's just an off track. All right, it's very well known that you can use this off track as a means to gain time during races and lose a draft or something. And so this is one of the most weaponizable off tracks in iRacing, I'd say. I use this off track all the time to just straight up gain time and rack up the X's if I have them to spare during a race. But obviously if you're in qualifying, it's kind of a bit harder. So in this lap in particular, it took me a while to start accelerating. So you see that I accelerated a bit late, accelerated on the apex here, pretty much, as I was absolutely sure I would make it out. And as you can see, the car is stable at this point. But I overslowed the car, or actually I waited too much to start accelerating because you can have both the left side tires up until the beginning of the drain here and not get an off track. If they are on top of the curb, it's fine. And so, yeah, I'd say I lost about a tenth here by being too conservative. All right, let's see the section in chase cam now. Okay, coming up to Pujon now. But this one is pretty easy. You see this, there's this window here. Let me show you. There's this kind of a orange window here. This is my reference in pretty much almost every car except for GTs. So this is my turning point. This is a nearly flat out corner. You have to brake a little bit, but you don't have to slow the car that much. I found two approaches that work well. We're in 5th gear right now. You can just keep 5th gear, just tap the brakes a little bit, or even try and not brake at all. Just let the car coast and make the corner, and then accelerate as you feel the car is stable. Or you can do what I did in this lap in particular, which is just quickly downshift to 4th, stabilize the car in the first part of the corner, and then just gun it as you exit. I found those two approaches to be very similar in terms of lap time. I do the 4th gear approach because it's what I used to in other cars. But to be honest, the staying 5th gear is also, I guess, fine, perhaps even faster. Okay, so we turn in, I downshift from 5th to 4th. As you see that the interval between like tapping the brakes, this is even too much braking to be honest. I could brake a little bit less here. And then I downshift, and as I get to the apex here, and I'm pretty much sure that I'll make it out, then you can just go on top of the throttle, no problem. It's kind of hard to go to 100% because sometimes if you have too much front downforce, which is not the case in the setup, but you can go a bit harder in front downforce if you'd like, then it's kind of easy to lose the back end of the car, especially as the tires get older. So you have to be a bit judicious on throttle usage here so you don't overcook your rears. And then just like control the grip amount you have and just make it out of the corner. Careful to not go overboard here and get out of the track. This is actually not necessary at all because the car has plenty of downforce, so yeah. And let's see this in chase cam. Okay, coming up to Fania. Or fun. I don't know how to pronounce this in French. Anyways. Okay, so in terms of braking point, the Allianz board here is a good braking marker. You can make it up until the curb if you prefer. I think you have to brake a bit too abruptly here, so I'm not a big fan. I like to brake a bit more progressive, so yeah, I brake pretty much right below the board, as you can see. As per usual, older tires, heavier car, pull it back a little bit. And we're gonna downshift from 5th to 2nd. And now this is just a matter of like real patience and throttle control. In terms of car positioning, you want to be... I'm not a big fan of being on top of the curb here, but it's manageable. I like to stay on the white line if at all possible. Absolutely do not get on top of the cement here, on top of the curb, this whatever it's called, because then you're gonna have to be extra patient on the throttle, otherwise you're gonna have more grip on the rear left compared to the rear right, and then the car is gonna spin to your right. Okay, so really avoid this curb if at all possible. Okay, now as you see, I'm being very patient on throttle, 50%, then no throttle, just waiting for the car to make it through. A good reference for you to know if you are good to go is this orange window here. As the halo passes through the orange window, I know, all right, probably time to start accelerating, not all the way, about 80%, and then once I'm sure I'll make it out, I accelerate. In terms of off track here. Your limit is the curb. All right, so if the left side tires are on top of the curb, that is good. If they go to the drain here, and obviously your right side tires will hit the gravel, that's going to be a 1X. So once again, very similar to the previous chicane, you have to make sure you don't accelerate too early here, because if you do, then you're going to overshoot. Pretty safe corner, possible to spin or crash, sure, I guess every corner has that risk, but this is one of the safer parts for you to make a mistake, I would say. Okay, so now we are in 4th gear, I believe, yes? Let's see. Yeah, 4th gear. And so I'm going to now shift from 4th to 3rd. In terms of braking point, I like the middle of the AstroTurf slash cement slash whatever you want part here. So if you think about this as, where's the chase cam? All right. So if you think about this curve, it starts here, ends there. So there's the middle point, which would be about here. This is the braking marker I'm looking for. All right. I'm gonna, a very easy part to overslow the car. I was doing this a lot at the beginning of practice. So you have to not brake too much, downshift from fourth to second, let the car coast a little bit, and then once you are sure of it, you can accelerate out of the corner. So yeah, like you see, I'm using about 50% brakes here. And another time that you don't want to get on top of the curb, especially this brown part here, not that the car is going to spin or anything, but you're going to have to be patient on throttle, then you're going to lose time. We're coming up to a big straight leading up to Blanquimont. So yeah, like try and keep the car. There's a chase cam here. So you can see this is a higher part, and then it kind of falls here, right? And then you have this concave part, I would say, in the curb here. So if the tires are right about where my mouse is, this is perfect, right? On top here, worse. On top of the brown part here, the cement part, then pretty bad. You're gonna have to wait a lot to start accelerating. In this lap in particular, let's see. This is pretty much great. Yeah, like this is really good. As you can see, like pretty much perfect spot for the tires to be. Then you can start accelerating right about at the apex, right? Let's see. Yeah, the apex. As the cement thingy here ends, you start accelerating. And then in terms of off track, same thing as usual, like right side tires on top of the curb, you're good. If they go past the drain, then it's an off track. Pretty much if the left side tires touch the gravel, you're done in terms of an off track. Okay, let's see the section in chase cam now. Okay, so we're coming up to Blanquimont, but not much to say here, to be honest. Like the car can take this easily flat. You just reduce distance traveled, and here what I found to gain not a lot of time, like not even half a tenth, is just to be really light on the wheel, so you don't want to turn the wheel too hard because you can scrub the fronts a little bit. So just be gentle with the car. It's gonna make the corner no problem. Right, so just be patient. And try not to overshoot, like to grab out the green part here or whatever. Like there's no need, the car has plenty of downforce to make it. And yeah. And coming up to the bus stop, or the chicane if you will, really easy brake marker. So there's this, kind of brownish part in the track. I don't think this is a visual thing because every time I've driven this track, this has been here. So this is a good reference point for you to know when to brake. So if we get next to it, I'm trying to see if I can tell you what I look for. Okay, so it starts right about here, right? There's this brown patch here, this brown patch here, and then imagine there's this darker gray patch, which is about a triangle here that you're delineating with my mouse here. So there's the brownish stuff here, the brownish stuff there, and there's this triangle, right? It was right about here. So the top apex of the triangle, right about here, would be my brake marker. Seems kind of hard to look for if you think about it, but not really. Once you like get used to the approach here, it's a stark difference in color between this and the more grayish part, and so pretty consistent in my experience. Braking hard in a straight line, downshifting from 6th to 1st. The brake marker as per usual, right? Heavier car, older tires, pull it back a little bit. Now you want to do all your braking in first gear, and as this is a downforce car, you look at my brake trace here, you see that I get pretty much 100%, as I am at speed, and as the speed of the car rapidly decreases, I have to bleed off the brakes, because otherwise I'm not going to have enough downforce. I'm going to lock up the tires. So it really helps to have load cell pedals or something, because you can kind of gauge a little bit better if you're giving it too much braking or too little braking, and then adjust accordingly. If you're using potentiometer brakes, then yeah, a bit of practice needed to get this just right. So I want to get on top of this curb here. If I stay on the white line, that's okay as well. It's not the end of the world. As I get to first gear, I want to turn in. It's important to slow the car enough so you don't overshoot. You want the right side tire to be right next to the sausage curb, so right about here, but not on top of the sausage curb itself. So this is pretty good. And then for this left-hander, you want to open up a little bit. You don't need to stay to the right side of the track or anything, but the middle of the track is good. If your car is right about here, then this is really bad, because you're going to have a very shallow entry and you're going to have to wait a lot to start accelerating, which is going to cost you some time, not a lot, because the follow-up straight is not that long. So then we turn in. Once again, same thing. We want the left side tires to be on top of the curb, and very judicious use of the throttle here. In terms of off-track, I could have, to be honest with you, I could have accelerated a little bit more. You can have your left side tires right about at the end of the curb, not past the drain, otherwise it's an off track. So as you can see, I had quite a bit more room to use here, which is about a tenth or two, give or take. And then I didn't like completely use the curb here as I could. Very easy part to spin around the car, okay? So you have to control your throttle really well. As the soft tires especially get older, you have less grip, and thus it's easier to give you too much throttle, and then the car is gonna just loop around. Not likely that you'll crash or anything, but then you're gonna have to turn the car around and lose about 10 seconds, so try and avoid that. And yeah, there we go. Let's see this final section in chase cam, and then we'll be done. Alright, and that is a lap around Spa. Right now for the final section of the video, where we talk about strategy. It's about 20 or 21 laps, doesn't really matter. I think it's 21 laps if I recall correctly. I did some long stints, not too much, because as I said, I'm pretty familiar with the track. And you can easily make it half distance with a tank, even using fuel map 1 or 6, whatever you prefer in terms of like throttle progression. Or even 7, I guess. And the result is that you're gonna have to make a single stop. So very obvious strat for the week. You can start with the softs, do about 10 laps or so, and then you go on to the hards and do about 11 laps, or the other way around, you start with the hards and then do 10-11 laps and move on to the softs. Keep an eye on your fuel, which is the F4 black box, just to make sure you're gonna make it. Maybe flip it around to fuel map 2 or 3 if you feel like maybe you use too much push or pass or something, but otherwise it's pretty easy. You're not gonna have any fuel problems, I don't think, at least. In terms of the strategy, once again, it's pretty obvious. The thing to be worried about, I would say, is that the drop-off of the tires is pretty severe, especially the softs. Very high energy corners going on here, especially Pujon and Blanquimont, so that makes the tires degrade more than one would expect. So you lose about a 1.5 second lap time from like new soft tires to 2-lap old soft tires even, and you lose quite a bit of grip, and thus you have to adjust your driving pretty much a lot, I would say, as the stint progresses, because the car gets slidier and slidier as you move through. So it demands a little bit of practice for you to be aware of what the car is going to do in the coming laps and not overdo it. Be patient, especially using the softs. The hard tires, as per usual, they are very stable, and so not too much worry about there. Alright? Well, in terms of overtaking, I didn't talk about it, but I guess it's pretty obvious, right? There's 2 very good overtaking spots in the track. Once you get past La Source and going on to Eau Rouge, Harion, and the Cama Straight, good spot to use your push to pass and try and pass someone before the Lecun. Or otherwise, if you're finished with pole frere, which is turn 10, I believe. Let's see. I have my reference here. No, it's turn 15. All right, so after you, and there's the final chicane, and then pole frere, and then you have that quite bit long straight leading up to Blanquimont. This is a little bit of a worse overtaking spot, I would say. You can try and pass someone, but what usually happens if you decide passing someone at that final stretch of the track is that they're gonna hang with you through the chicane, likely, and then through La Source, unless you're like significantly faster than them, right? And so they're gonna be right back at your tail as you get to Eau Rouge and Camel Straight, and then you're gonna lock yourself into another battle for the following lap. So usually what I like to do is just chill out, wait, and then once I get to La Source, I try and nail the corner there really well, and then pass on the Camel Straight, because then you have the full second sector, which is the twistier bit of the corner, to create a gap and then avoid getting passed again as we move forward with the race. Alright, so in terms of like passing strategies, this is what I would recommend to you. Also very, very careful with Eau Rouge. I've seen quite a few accidents of people trying to take that too wide. It is possible, but both drivers need to be conscious and like give each other space, which is not always something that happens, right? I expect this should be a very fun week. I love Spa, no secret there. And it's usually a very popular track. I ran some numbers in the beginning of the year. And aside from Nordschleife, this was and obviously Indianapolis, which you can't use anymore, at least for the time being. Spa, I think, is the third most popular track in the IR-18 rotation, not without reason, and thus I expect very good participation this week, even outside of the US time zones, so maybe even European time zones in the middle of the afternoon for us in Brazil, in my case, or in the US if you're watching from there. Should go official, at least with like 10 drivers or so, I would imagine. Okay? So yeah, thanks very much for watching. I hope this was fun and informative for you. And well, next week is going to be week 13, right? So not much going on. Perhaps I'll post a video if there is something interesting. I see they're releasing the LMP3 car. I plan on buying that and testing it out. The recent cars on iRacing have been pretty good. I found that the Formula Ford, the Ray FF 1600, had very good handling and force feedback, and so I would expect nothing less from the LMP3. If it's in any way comparable to the LMP2, I'm going to be ecstatic, and if it's better than that, well, then that's going to be great. And yeah, let's see, maybe there's even newer tracks that we haven't seen yet, or new cars. We can talk about it. Otherwise, we'll be back for, I think, Watkins Glen, right? I think it's the first track of the open wheel rotation in week 1 of the next season. See you then. Bye bye.